He told me he needed to reclaim his masculine energy, but apparently that included another woman's lap. When Ethan said he joined a men's healing group, I actually felt proud. I thought, finally, he's taking ownership of his emotional baggage. I was the kind of girlfriend who read every attachment theory thread on Reddit, who bought us books on communication, who journaled growth isn't linear like a mantra. I thought I was the problem, that maybe I was too demanding, too emotional, not giving him room to become who he was trying to be. He came home from their weekly circles smelling like sandalwood and validation. He spoke in these new, vague phrases, like I'm integrating my shadow, and I need to honor my truth. I didn't get it, but I nodded. I wanted to be the cool, supportive partner, the one who doesn't question male vulnerability. God, I wanted to believe he was finally healing. Healing meant he'd choose us better. The first time he mentioned Mel, I didn't flinch. She was just one of the facilitators, helping them explore emotional polarity. I didn't even blink when he said they were doing paired breathing. I laughed it off. I said, as long as you're not soul-gazing naked, and he grinned and said, not yet. That yet hit weird, like a splinter I didn't notice until it festered. But I buried it. I told myself not to be insecure. That real love means trust. That jealousy is a wound, not a warning. So I started packing him healthy snacks before his retreats and bought him new journals. I even drove him once and waited in the car while they closed sacred space. I thought love meant patience. But something changed. He got colder when he came back. Not distant like before. Colder. Like I was a nuisance interrupting a more enlightened version of his life. He said less and less, but always had the same smug smile. You wouldn't get it, he'd say. It's a somatic thing. I felt like I was losing him to a language I didn't speak. And then came the photos. It started when Laura sent me a message. Hey, is that Ethan? With another woman? This was posted under the Sacred Union hashtag. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link, already half knowing what I'd see. There they were, Ethan and Mel, sitting in a field of sunflowers, foreheads, touching, eyes closed, with the caption, Divine Masculine and Feminine, finally home. Tagged, public, proud. I read that line over and over. Finally home. I was home. What was I, a layover? I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared, scrolled. Saw them holding hands and matching linen. Saw comments like, you two radiate healing energy. Saw Mel reply, it's all about divine alignment. I felt like I was watching someone else's dream. A dream built on the ruins of mine. He came home that night like nothing was wrong. I asked how the retreat was, and he said, transformative. I looked at his face, trying to find the lie. He didn't even blink. He lied, and he smiled, like he had no idea I already knew. That was the moment everything changed, because I smiled back. Not because I forgave him, but because I knew something he didn't, and I wasn't going to. Confront him, yet silent revenge ages better. We met at a co-working cafe in Echo Park. I was editing ad copy, and he asked if the oat milk was any good. It wasn't, but I said yes. That's how it started. Not with fireworks, with almond croissants and Spotify lo-fi playlists. He told me he was a writer working on a novel about masculinity in the modern world. I remember thinking, finally, someone emotionally aware, someone evolved. Ethan had this gentle chaos about him. He'd scribble thoughts in a tiny black notebook, quote, Jung over morning coffee, and talk about his childhood like it was a landmine he was still learning to walk through. I fell in love with the way he talked about healing, not the kind of man who slams doors, the kind who analyzes why they were ever closed. We moved in together 6 months later. It felt fast, but right. He said I made him feel safe to expand. I told him I believed in building together. I meant it. I cooked. He wrote. I supported his workshops even when he only got 5 attendees. I clapped the loudest. I became the cheerleader I never had, for him. In hindsight, I should have noticed how often we meant me supporting him. He'd say things like, I'm just not in a place to give right now, or my inner work takes all my bandwidth. But I excused it. I thought emotional growth had seasons. I kept waiting for spring. I remember one night, he came home late from a men's circle and I had lit candles and made pasta. He looked at the table and said, That's sweet, but I already ate with the brothers. Brothers. He used that word like it was holy. Like they were monks on some divine mission. Not just 30-something men hugging in a yurt in Topanga. Still, I convinced myself he was different. He wasn't yelling or cheating or ghosting. He was just healing. And I told myself that real love meant letting someone heal at their pace, even if I was bleeding out trying to hold the space for it. My friends started to notice. Laura asked once, When's the last time he asked how you were? I laughed, changed the subject, said he was just going through something. I defended him like a PR rep for a man who wouldn't even post me on his Instagram. But I told myself that privacy was maturity, not secrecy. He started referring to himself in third person when talking about emotions. Ethan feels overwhelmed. Ethan needs solitude, like he was narrating a self-help audiobook. I didn't know how to say, I miss the version of you that looked me in the eyes. So I just stayed quiet, hoping he'd come back. He journaled. I cleaned. He cried in the shower. I made tea. He said he was doing inner child work. I babysat his ego like it was fragile glass. I didn't realize I was becoming invisible, just the emotional scaffolding for his spiritual glow-up. The first retreat he joined was in Ojai. I helped him pack, folded his white clothes, wrote him a note he never mentioned receiving. He texted me twice that weekend, once to say, off-grid, for integration, and once to ask if I could Venmo him gas money. I stayed up that night scrolling the retreat's Instagram, trying to understand what somatic shadow release even was, wondering if healing meant becoming someone I couldn't reach. But I kept cheering, kept believing. Because a girl like me should be grateful, right? He chose me until he didn't. The red flags didn't wave. They whispered. Quiet, confusing contradictions dressed as growth. It started with small things, like how Ethan suddenly couldn't tolerate negativity whenever I vented. I'd say something about work and he'd sigh, close his eyes, and tell me I was lowering his frequency. I stopped sharing. Started editing myself, not because I wanted to, but because silence felt safer. He began correcting my emotions. I'd say, that hurt me, and he'd reply, that's your projection. I'd ask for more time together, and he'd say, you're codependent. At first, I Googled everything. Attachment styles, gaslighting, spiritual bypassing. I wanted to be better. He made me believe I was the one with unhealed wounds ruining our connection. Anytime I cried, he said I was emotionally flooding him. He once walked out mid-argument and left a voice note later saying, Cassie, I'm not your father. Please process your abandonment issues before projecting them on me. He used therapy language like a weapon, sliced me open with empathy, words that sounded kind but hit like blame. And when I tried to call him out, he'd say I was attacking his process. You're resisting my growth, he'd whisper. Not yell, whisper, like it was sacred. Like my hurt feelings were obstacles, not signals. It made me question everything. How could I be the toxic one if I was the only one apologizing? He didn't lie, not directly. He just told partial truths with spiritual glitter. He said Mel was helping him regulate his nervous system. that she was a container for his masculine energy. He called her medicine. I wanted to scream, "She's not a tincture, she's a woman." But I just nodded, because questioning meant controlling, and I'd already been labeled that once. He started locking his phone, said it was part of his boundaries, changed his Instagram bio to embodied king, healing in private. Took our only couple photo down and replaced it with a quote. "Sometimes love means letting go of control." I told myself it was just a phase, but deep down, I was scared I was becoming someone else just to keep being chosen. He began using timeouts during conflict. "I need to self-regulate," he'd say, and disappear for hours. No texts, no calls. And when he came back, he'd ask, "Why are you still activated?" Like my panic was a performance. Like being ignored didn't leave bruises, too. Mel's name started coming up more. Not directly, in parables. Mel shared this amazing insight in group. Or, Mel held space for me when I felt unseen. I became a ghost in my own relationship. Watching another woman slowly become the one he turned to for everything I used to be. But when I asked directly, he'd smile and say, "Don't make this about jealousy. That's your scarcity wound." And suddenly, I was the one apologizing again. For loving him too much. For wanting him to look at me the way he looked at her when he spoke about healing. I tried to reclaim space. Suggested we do a couples session. He said no. That couples therapy was too invasive for where he was in his process. I offered to read the books he was into. He said they wouldn't resonate with me, that I wasn't ready for that level of awareness. I once asked if he still loved me. He touched my face and said, "Love isn't a feeling, it's a frequency. And sometimes we just fall out of alignment." That sentence hit harder than any breakup ever could, because it sounded profound. But it was a funeral. In slow motion, he called it growth. I called it ghosting, while still in the same room. I didn't plan to find the full album. I was just trying to understand. I typed Mel's name into Instagram again, heart pounding, half hoping the post Lara sent was a one-time fluke. But then I saw it. Her profile wasn't just public, it was curated. Every photo a temple to their love. Their union, as she called it. There were 10 photos of Ethan and Mel, holding each other, doing partner yoga, even one where she sat in his lap, eyes closed, her hands pressed, to his chest like he was some divine altar. The caption read, "He sees me, in all my shadows and light. Sacred masculine meets awakened womb. This is what healing love looks like." My hands went numb. What made it worse was the comments. Dozens of people praising them. "Power couple, energy. You two are what the world needs." And Mel responded to almost every one. Hashtags like Tosh Twin Flames, a divine union, a healed love. It wasn't just a secret. It was a celebration, and I was the only one who didn't get an invite. He came home later that night, barefoot, smelling like Palo Santo, and humming. I asked him calmly, "Who is Mel to you?" He paused, blinked, and then said, "Cass, I told you, she's just a part of the process." My voice cracked. The process includes kissing her in a sunflower field? That's when his mask slipped, just for a second. He tried to play it off, said the retreat was experimental, and that they were exploring polarity through embodiment. I was done with euphemisms. "You're sleeping with her." He didn't deny it. He just said, "Don't reduce it to sex. That's such a 3D mindset." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't cry anymore. I asked him how long it had been going on. He shrugged, said timelines weren't linear in spiritual dynamics. I asked him if he ever loved me. He said, "I loved the version of me that you reflected, but that version isn't aligned anymore." I felt like my identity had been erased in a single sentence. The next day, he posted a photo of just himself, holding a crystal with the caption, "Emerging from shadow, embracing truth, no more hiding. No tag, no mention of me. Just the final gut punch that told the world he was free, while I was still piecing myself together in the dark. What crushed me wasn't the betrayal. It was the performance. He didn't just cheat. He curated his infidelity into content. He spiritualized it, branded it, turned it into an aesthetic. He begged for sacred privacy, but their love was already trending. Lara came over and sat with me on the floor. I showed her the posts. She didn't say "I told you so." She just held my hand while I shook. I felt humiliated not just by him, but by myself, for defending him, for waiting, for trying so hard to be spiritually evolved that I forgot how to be angry. I didn't block him right away. I watched. Every story, every post. I became addicted to my own heartbreak. They shared poetry now, her words, his voice. She cried, I held her. She opened, I entered. Love, without the need to fix. I wanted to scream. I was the one who held you when you were empty. I was the one who paid the rent when your book flopped. I was the one who listened to you cry over your ex. I was the one who helped you pack for your sacred retreats. And now I was just deleted, archived, like an old journal you don't need anymore. He didn't even apologize. Not really. He said, I hope someday you'll understand that this was necessary for my evolution. Like betrayal was a growth tactic. Like emotional abuse could be rebranded as awakening. But the part that hurt the most? He never once looked back. The days after felt like a death, but the kind no one brings flowers for. I woke up to silence. His toothbrush was still in the cup, his hoodie still on the back of the chair. His energy? Gone. Like he had evaporated, ascended, while I was stuck, in the debris of a love that never even said goodbye. I stopped eating. I'd open the fridge and just stare. Nothing tasted like anything. Even water felt heavy. Lara kept trying to get me out of the apartment, but I couldn't move. I sat on the couch for hours, refreshing Mel's page like a masochist, watching the woman who healed my boyfriend perform the role of sacred soulmate in real time. He posted a video 3 days later. Him, barefoot again, sitting on a cushion, soft music playing. Healing isn't linear, he said. Sometimes you have to hurt others to find yourself. I nearly threw my phone. I wasn't collateral damage in some mystical journey. I was a person, a woman who gave him everything. And now I was just background noise in his enlightenment arc. I didn't tell my parents. Not at first. They liked him. My mom would always say, he seems so deep. And he was just deep into himself. I couldn't bear to hear them say, maybe it's for the best. I wasn't ready for logic. I needed space to bleed. Nights were the worst. I'd scroll until my eyes burned, looking at their healing couple content. His hand on her belly, her hand on his heart, the way she looked at him, like I used to. I kept hearing his voice in my head. This isn't betrayal, it's alignment. I wanted to scream. I cried so hard one night I vomited. Just curled, up in the bathroom, gasping. My body didn't know how to process this. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was awakening. Just not the kind he preached. The kind where you realize someone you trusted used your love as training wheels, then left you in the dirt once they could ride solo. I replayed every moment, every time I ignored my gut, every "You're just insecure," that I swallowed. Every time I made excuses for why he wouldn't hold my hand in public. I thought I was being mature, supportive. In truth, I was being erased. Slowly, gently, expertly. People around me started saying things like, "You dodged a bullet." But it didn't feel like that. It felt like the bullet hit me and everyone was pretending I looked fine. I smiled at brunch. I nodded through meetings. But inside, I was screaming. I journaled obsessively. Wrote down every phrase he ever said to gaslight me. Every spiritual buzzword he used to shut me up. Triggered. Unconscious pattern. Wounded feminine. I wrote them down like spells I could someday break. Like maybe if I named the demons, I could finally stop summoning them. Lara made me a playlist. Called it Break Up But Make It Witchy. First song, I Am Enough. I cried through the first 2 notes, but it helped. It was the first time I felt seen since it happened, like someone remembered I existed outside his shadow. I deleted his photos, then undeleted them, then deleted again. I was unraveling in loops, but somewhere in the wreckage I started writing my own phrases. I am not your practice round. Healing isn't licensed permission to harm. I was still hurt, but I was waking up, slowly. He walked away, enlightened. I stayed shattered, scrolling through my own erasure. But pain has a strange way of sharpening things, and soon I'd stop crying and start investigating. I didn't plan to become a detective, but heartbreak has a way of turning you into one. I started small, checking his tagged posts, reading every caption Mel had ever written, going back months. She was a prolific sharer. And Ethan. He wasn't just featured. He was present. Long before the sunflower photos. The first real clue came in a comment under a post from February, 2 months before our official breakup. Someone had written, "So happy to see this finally happening. Your energy has shifted since January." Mel replied with a heart and the words, "When the soul says yes, the body follows." January, my birthday month. I searched her captions for dates. And that's when I saw it. A photo posted January 18th. Them in a forest, barefoot, holding hands in front of a fire pit. I recognized the necklace he was wearing. I gave it to him. He said he was going on a solo integration retreat that weekend. Solo, my ass. I started looking deeper. Her stories were archived. In one, from late December, he's visible in the background during a cacao ceremony. Another, from New Year's Eve. Them standing close, not touching, but with a kind of tension you only notice when you know what to look for. He was already pulling away. I just didn't see it. I downloaded every post, every video, every spiritual caption he probably whispered into her ear. Then I found her blog. Yes, blog, buried in her Linktree. That's where the truth screamed at me. Entry dated March 5th. He came to me raw, confused, still entangled in old wounds. I held him without needing to fix. I let him be reborn. March 5th. We were still together. That weekend he told me he needed space to fast and unplug. Said he'd be off-grid. No texts, just silence. And I obeyed, like a good, supportive partner. Meanwhile, he was being reborn in someone else's arms, someone who didn't need to fix him. That line burned. I copied the entire blog into a Word doc. Lara and I highlighted timestamps, cross-referenced his messages to me with her public love diary. The overlap was so clear it almost felt staged. He thought I wouldn't find out. But his truth was public, poetic, and idiotic. I emailed the retreat center he used to frequent. pretended to be interested in the couple's immersion weekend. They replied, enthusiastically, "Our next retreat is full, but we'd love to add you to the wait list. Ethan and Mel are leading a workshop in 2 weeks. Sacred Union Activation." My mouth dropped. Leading, not attending, leading. They weren't just a couple. They were a brand now, offering guidance to others on how to release trauma through embodied love. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was fascinated. How do you sell enlightenment built on betrayal? I guess you just call it a workshop. I printed everything. His photos, her captions, the blog, the emails. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, yet. But I knew I couldn't just walk away with all this truth in my hands. Not when he was still out there preaching sacred honesty. That's when the idea started forming. Not revenge, clarity, exposure. Not to ruin him, to reveal him. Not in rage, in silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than screams. I looked at myself in the mirror that night. For the first time, I didn't see the abandoned woman. I saw the witness, the woman who survived. And suddenly I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to undo the myth. Let it collapse under its own weight. I didn't need to set fire to anything. All I had to do was open the blinds and let the light hit the mess. He built his new life on performance, so I became the audience he never asked for, but always deserved. The retreat was 2 weeks away. Sacred Union Activation Weekend, hosted in a glassy cabin in the Santa Monica Mountains. The flyer was all pastels and promises. For conscious couples ready to step into divine mirror work. I laughed. The only mirror Ethan ever needed was his reflection. I created a fake profile. Sarah Bloom. Spiritual seeker. Healing from a past rooted in disempowerment. I paid the non-refundable deposit and received the itinerary. Saturday night. Sacred Witness Circle. Sunday morning. Closing embodiment ritual. I knew that was my window. I didn't go alone. Lara came with me. As support, but mostly because she refused to miss it. "This isn't just karma," she said, applying her lip gloss. "This is art." We arrived early, blending in easily with the linen crowd and Palo Santo smoke. Everyone had that dazed peace look, including Mel, who greeted us at check-in like we were long-lost sisters. Ethan didn't recognize me at first. I was in sunglasses, my hair pinned up. He barely looked. That was his first mistake. The man who once studied my face like scripture now saw just another goddess in process. He walked past me, laughing with another facilitator, unaware he had invited his own reckoning. Saturday night came. Candles. Cacao. Everyone seated in a circle, holding space, sharing intimate truths. Then it was my turn. I stood, looked directly at Ethan, removed my glasses, and said, "I came here to thank the facilitators. One of them taught me how to recognize emotional abuse, dressed as enlightenment." He froze. His mouth parted like a prayer gone wrong. A ripple of confusion swept through the circle. Mel looked at me, then at him. Then I pulled out the envelope. My printed folder. Every photo. Every blog post. I handed it to the nearest participant and said, "This is what gaslighting looks like in spiritual form." Mel took it, trembling. She read the captions. Her smile dissolved like wax. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just stood there, letting the silence do what noise never could. He begged under his breath, "Cassie, please, not here." I just smiled. Because he had no idea. This was always the plan. He looked around, realizing that his carefully built persona was slipping. One woman whispered, "You were with her, while leading?" The man beside her stood up. "You should step down." This isn't sacred. This is ego. I turned to Mel. You weren't the other woman. You were just next. He doesn't heal. He hides. Then I walked out. Slowly. No dramatics. Just finality. The kind of silence that echoes in a room even after the door closes. Outside, Lara was waiting in the car. We didn't speak for a while. Just drove through the canyon, windows down, letting the air cleanse what he had polluted. He texted the next day, "You humiliated me." I replied with 2 words, "You exposed yourself." He begged for sacred privacy, but he made his betrayal public. I just let people read the fine print, and for the first time in months, I felt something deeper than anger. I felt clean. People always talk about closure like it's a conversation, a sit-down, a final explanation. But real closure? It's silent. It's when the weight on your chest lifts without warning, when you realize you haven't checked their profile in 3 days, and you don't want to anymore. After the retreat, I blocked him everywhere, not out of spite, out of preservation. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to fix. I didn't want to hear him justify betrayal with spiritual metaphors. He was no longer a mystery I needed to solve. He was just done. I started reclaiming my space, took down the photos, donated the mug he always used, repainted the wall he said was too loud for his nervous system. I made it red, bold, loud, like the version of me that had been buried under his silence. She was crawling back to life, one brushstroke at a time. Lara and I traveled to Joshua Tree, not for healing, not for soul retrieval, just for joy, just to scream into the desert and eat overpriced tacos and dance under stars. I didn't perform peace. I lived it. And in those quiet moments, when I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe, I realized he never truly knew me. He knew the version of me that tiptoed around his moods, that filtered herself to be more palatable, that Googled how to love a man through a spiritual awakening. But he never met me. Not really. Not the woman who rises even when broken. Not the woman who turns grief into power. I started writing again. Not about him. About me. About the ways women bend and stretch and carry until there's nothing left, and then somehow rebuild with the very pieces they were shattered with. I submitted one of my essays to a site for emotional storytelling. It went viral. The headline? He joined a healing group. I found his couple's photos online. Strangers reached out. Women. Men. People who had been manipulated under the name of growth. They thanked me. Not because I exposed him, but because I said out loud what so many had been gaslit into thinking was weakness. I gave language to their silence, and in doing so, I healed mine. I started therapy. Real therapy. No incense. No chakra talk. Just deep, uncomfortable, liberating truth. I told my therapist, I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was. And she said, that's not love. That's loss of illusion. That moment cracked me open. In the best way. I no longer needed revenge. I had revelation. I no longer needed closure. I had clarity. I no longer needed him to see me. I saw myself. Fully. Fiercely. Finally. One night, I lit a candle. Not for him, for me. For the version of me who waited, who believed, who held space for someone who never intended to stay. I whispered, "You're free now." And I meant it. He left me, but he didn't break me. I broke the spell.